Today, we're diving into a project that was supposed to be a dream come true, a huge industrial city that would create 80,000 jobs. But instead, it became one of the country's most spectacular failures. This is the story of the Pakistan Textile City. This one sentence, it really says it all. Billions of rupees were spent, years of planning went into it, and the result was absolutely nothing. So how on earth does a project with so much potential end up as, quite literally, an empty plot of land?
All right, to figure out what went so wrong, we have to go back to the very beginning. What was the grand vision for this city in the first place?
The idea was actually pretty brilliant and powerful. A massive 1,250-acre industrial zone right next to the port in Karachi. This wasn't just for any old textile manufacturing. It was specifically for high-value processing, things like dyeing and finishing. You know, the stuff that would make Pakistan's exports super competitive on the global stage. And this wasn't just about money or exports. The project promised to create a staggering 80,000 jobs. For a city like Karachi, a number like that isn't just a statistic, it's a total game changer. It was a symbol of hope and a huge step forward for the entire country. So the vision was grand, for sure. But what about the actual plan? Who was backing this thing? And how exactly were they going to pull it off? And I mean, just look at the heavy hitters behind this project. This was no small operation. You had the federal government as the biggest stakeholder. The provincial government was in on it, plus a whole bunch of major banks and financial institutions. It was a massive public-private partnership. On paper, it looked like everyone who mattered was fully on board.
The blueprint itself was meticulous. We're talking over 700 industrial plots, all of them supposed to be fully serviced with their own dedicated lines for water, gas, and power. It was planned with logistics hubs right next to Port Qasim to make shipping super easy, a modern wastewater treatment plant, and it even came with all the tax breaks of a special economic zone. On paper, it was absolutely perfect. But as we all know, what's on paper and what happens on the ground can be two totally different things. Despite all the powerful backers and this perfect blueprint, some really serious problems started showing up almost right away. And here it is, the single most fatal flaw. High-end textile processing needs a ton of water. The plan called for 18 million gallons a day. But that dedicated water pipeline that was supposed to deliver it, it was never built. Not a single pipe was laid. And without water, a textile city is just, well, it's just dust.
And it wasn't just the water. A government moratorium suddenly blocked any new gas connections. And that dedicated power grid they promised, that never showed up either. So now you've got a zone with no water, no gas, and no reliable electricity. It was completely impossible for any factory to even think about setting up shop there. With such basic, fundamental failures, the project was basically doomed. This whole cascade of problems led straight to a full-on financial collapse, and eventually, the official end of the dream. The timeline just tells this sad story of a really rapid decline. It was established in 2009 with all this fanfare, but by 2013, the cracks were already huge. By 2016, the board itself had given up and voted to shut it down. And just a year later, in 2017, the government made it official. From a grand vision to total collapse in less than a decade. Wow. So what was the final bill for this failure? Well, by 2016, the project's liabilities had swollen to nearly 5 billion rupees. That is an unbelievable amount of debt for a project that, remember, hadn't produced a single thing. And to make it even worse, this wasn't just a one-time loss. The government was paying around 400 million rupees every single year just to cover the interest on the bank loans for the project. It was a financial black hole, just sucking up public money with nothing to show for it. So in the end, Pakistan Textile City became the perfect cautionary tale, a textbook example of how not to run a massive project. So let's really break it down. What were the absolute core reasons for this colossal failure? While the postmortems all point to a perfect storm of failure. First off, there was a complete lack of coordination between different government departments, which is why the basic utilities never got delivered. On top of that, you had serious financial mismanagement. I mean, taking out high-interest commercial loans for a long-term public project is just a recipe for disaster. And underneath it all were constant governance issues and political interference, which created instability from day one. And this is the final tragic summary. Over 2.5 billion rupees were actually spent on the land and some basic infrastructure. And for all that money, for all that hope, the final output was a big fat zero. Not one factory, not one job, not a single meter of cloth.
You know, the story of Pakistan Textile City is just such a stark reminder that a grand vision isn't enough, not even close. Without proper execution, without coordination, and without a realistic plan for the most basic things, even the biggest dreams can completely unravel. It really leaves you wondering, doesn't it? How many other great ideas out there are just one fatal flaw, like a missing water pipe, away from becoming their own cautionary tale?